So for our project, we looked at the relationship between terrorism incidents and a number of different human freedom indicators, so economic freedom and personal freedom. What we found was that the indicators that are most positively correlated with terrorism, as in a high presence of these indicates also a most likely high presence of terrorism, were disappearances, press killings, religious harassment, and restrictions on freedom of identity. So that would be, for example, gender identity or sexual identity. In countries where those are more restrictive, we tend to see a higher incidence of terrorism. Now, on the other hand, those factors that are most negatively correlated with terrorism we found to be low tax burden and also freedom of association.
Now, we got this data from two data sets. First, the Human Freedom Index. Second, the Global Terrorism data set. The Human Freedom Index spans about a decade and has data by country and by year, with various freedom factors for that country and year. The Global Terrorism data set has a row for every terrorist attack for about the last 50 years. The first analysis we did was looking at human freedom levels over time. We can see from the simple analysis that human freedom has been fairly stable in the last decade, and that westernized countries are generally the most free.
Before we looked into relationship and correlation with terrorism, we thought it would be helpful to find those factors which most distinguish high freedom countries from low freedom countries. Essentially, out of the 120 some indicators that we looked at, which ones are most important for determining freedom? What we found was that between the upper quartile and bottom quartile of the Human Freedom Index, what was most different between those were women's rights, corruption in the legal system, volatility of inflation, and protectionist trade regulation. On the similar side, we found that countries in the upper quartile and the bottom quartile were not really distinguished so well by gender reassignment availability, sexual identity acceptance, labor laws, and freedom of association.
So now, moving on to the correlation between terrorism incidents and human freedom within a country. We found this with a compilation of linear regressions. You can see in this example that we have terrorism incidents versus human freedom score in the United States as negatively correlated. So finally, that leads us to the graph of all of the most positively and most negatively correlated human freedom factors with terrorism incidents in a country.